24 hours after Stefon Diggs officially became a Washington Commander, this fan base is still riding that wave, and honestly, faithful, so am I. Just a day ago, we were talking about this roster as improved but still carrying a few real holes. Now with Diggs in the building, this offense suddenly looks like it could legitimately lead the league in scoring. Let's break down exactly where things stand with the signing, why history says this move could be a genuine game-changer for Jayden Daniels, and a couple of key secondary updates worth tracking heading into the rest of camp. Let's start with the logistics, because there is real, practical business to take care of before Diggs actually steps onto that practice field. He is currently going through his physical evaluation, and there is real reason to expect that process goes smoothly without any red flags. While a certain other recent Commanders free agent addition spent his early days in Washington taking selfies in team gear, dancing in parking lots, and closing on a massive house he ultimately never used, Diggs has spent his time simply working out, showing up in the weight room, and putting in real, visible conditioning work every single day. That is not the profile of somebody carrying a hidden injury concern. Once he clears that physical, all signs point toward him practicing as early as Friday, especially given that his first official media availability with his team is reportedly scheduled for right after that specific practice session. If you are planning on attending, there is a real chance you get to see Diggs suited up in the practice whites, lining up alongside Terry McLaurin and the rest of this receiver room for the very first time. Whether he actually knows the full playbook by then remains to be seen, but as a savvy, accomplished veteran, he certainly knows the underlying concepts well enough to get up to speed quickly. There is even a real chance he sees some snaps in next week's joint practice against the Dolphins, and possibly limited preseason run alongside the rest of this team's core starters as well. Now here is the part of this signing that should genuinely have this fan base excited, because Diggs carries a real documented track record of showing up and immediately elevating the quarterbacks he plays alongside. Look back at 2019 into 2020 with the Buffalo Bills. Josh Allen threw for right around 3,000 yards and 20 touchdowns in his third season. The very next year, his first with Diggs as his primary target, Allen exploded for roughly 4,500 yards and 37 touchdowns, earning his first career Pro Bowl selection in the process. Or look at what just happened in New England. Drake May's rookie season produced solid but unspectacular volume numbers. The very next season, with Diggs now in that receiver room, May's production jumped dramatically, helping carry that Patriots offense all the way to the Super Bowl and putting him firmly in the middle of a genuine MVP conversation. Now, to be completely fair here, neither of those leaps happened purely because of Diggs alone. Plenty of other variables were in play in both situations. But the pattern is real and it is hard to ignore. Diggs has a genuine history of elevating the offenses and the quarterbacks around him, and that bodes extremely well for what this partnership with Daniels could become. And honestly, nobody on this entire roster deserves this moment more than Terry McLaurin. Entering his 8th NFL season at 31 years old, McLaurin is finally getting something he has never really had at any point in his career. A legitimate franchise quarterback he has built real continuity and chemistry with, paired alongside a genuinely respected, accomplished receiver working the opposite side of the field. McLaurin has quietly put together an incredible run of individual production despite constantly shifting quarterback situations and thin supporting casts around him. Now he finally gets a real running mate. And here is what makes this receiver room genuinely fascinating heading into the season. Nobody actually knows for certain who ends up being the true number one option. Diggs could easily outproduce McLaurin this year. Prior to a torn ankle that briefly interrupted his own streak, Diggs was working on nearly a decade of consistent 1,000-yard receiving seasons, and at his absolute peak, he has hit statistical heights that even McLaurin has not quite reached in his own career. But McLaurin could just as easily remain the primary option too. Either outcome works out beautifully for this offense, and it does not stop there. Receiver Luke McCaffrey currently leads this entire roster in total receptions through training camp and has been responsible for some of the most explosive plays of the entire summer, including back-to-back 40-yard connections earlier this week. Rookie receiver Antonio Williams continues flashing real, genuine upside. Tight end Chigo Okonkwo brings real vertical speed to that position, complemented by a more traditional inline blocking option in John Bates. Add in a genuine franchise left tackle anchoring the offensive line along with a highly regarded first-round investment at the other tackle spot and outside of the center position, which remains a legitimate question mark. There is genuinely very little left to complain about with this offensive personnel. The pieces are all there. Now let's shift over to a couple of important defensive updates. According to ESPN's John Keim, both punter Tressway and cornerback Trey Amos are set to be reevaluated, with real optimism that both players could return to practice as soon as Friday. Amos in particular has been dropping some fairly clear hints on social media that he is itching to get back onto the field, and while nothing is guaranteed until it is officially confirmed, the overall signs here are genuinely encouraging. Amos returning matters enormously because his presence directly impacts one of the more fascinating subplots brewing in this secondary all camp long: the ongoing positional shuffle involving cornerback Mike Sainristil. This coaching staff has been moving Sainristil around between the slot and the outside all camp, and the picture is becoming a little clearer now. Veteran cornerback Rasul Douglas has quietly been one of the single best defensive players at this entire training camp, and given how well he played down the stretch of last season. There is no version of this where he signed here simply to sit on the bench. Douglas is clearly locking down one of the two outside cornerback jobs. Amos, when healthy, looked like a genuinely legitimate NFL starting cornerback during his limited action last season, arguably the best player in an otherwise underwhelming secondary. And it is worth remembering he was considered a legitimate first-round talent before a medical concern caused him to slide into the second round on draft day. If both Douglas and Amos are handling the two outside cornerback jobs, that logically pushes Sainristil into more of an interior role. The problem is that Sainristil's frame has not always translated cleanly to consistent snaps on the inside through his first two NFL seasons. But here is what makes this genuinely fascinating. This new defensive scheme leans heavily on three safety looks, meaning the traditional nickel or dime spot on a lot of snaps might actually belong to a third safety rather than a true slot cornerback at all. So where exactly does that leave Sainristil? Honestly, it remains a genuine open question. This new scheme's sheer level of positional interchangeability makes it difficult to predict with total confidence, and it is worth remembering that a very similar uncertainty once surrounded linebacker Frankie Louvu's role earlier in camp, before he emerged as this defense's clear green dot leader and most consistent presence with the starting unit. Sainristil's specific traits could end up being an extremely natural fit for exactly what this scheme wants to do. Where he actually lines up and how much he plays remains to be seen. Here is why all of this matters so much heading into the season. If this defense can simply be an average, middle-of-the-pack unit around the league, this offense now looks talented enough to carry this team deep into serious playoff contention. Getting Trey Amos back onto the field and finding his rhythm is a real, meaningful step toward making that happen. And there is something genuinely poetic about imagining Amos working back into game shape by going up against Stefon Diggs and Terry McLaurin every single day in practice. That is about as tough a welcome back test as this league has to offer, and iron sharpening iron in exactly that fashion could end up making both sides of this football team significantly better heading into Week 1. So here is what I want to know from you, faithful. How are you feeling about this training camp so far? Now that Stefon Diggs is officially in the building and Trey Amos could be back on the field within days, drop your thoughts down in the comments. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, because there is a lot more Commanders coverage still coming your way throughout the rest of this summer. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I will see you in the next one. Raise hail.